If you're a young person and you can't afford to live here, then maybe you should not live here. I mean, that is a real thing. Yeah, I know that we've now grown up in a society that says that you deserve to live where you grew up, but the reality is that the history of America is almost literally the opposite of that. The history of America is you go to a place where there is opportunity. And if the opportunities are limited here and they're not changing, then you really should try to think about other places where you have better opportunities.
It's fair to say Ben Shapiro is not having a great time right now. According to just screenshots I've seen around on social media and looking at it myself, he has lost about 20,000 subscribers off his YouTube channel. But if you're losing subscribers that much, it means you're not getting ones in to replace it. And I want to talk about the reasons why Ben Shapiro is having a downfall right now with conservatives, because a lot of people just say it's because of the influence of people like Nick Fuentes, and they're all anti-Semites, so they hate Ben Shapiro because he's a Jew, and they hate him because they hate Israel, because they're anti-Semitic as well, because their problems with Israel only stem out of it being Jewish, not for its crimes against humanity. I want to talk about that a bit more, because I don't just think it's that. I think it's a problem with conservatives in the West generally, is that conservatives like Ben Shapiro, they offer the racism and fascism socially, right? They say the most terrible shit about minorities, but in terms of actually the economic solutions to problems, they offer nothing. In fact, they don't just offer nothing, they tell people you're insane for even demanding more out of your government. Like, you should just appreciate the status quo because America or the UK is such a great place to live. But what people now, with the conservative split, of course it's about Israel, but it's also about, do you actually want to make the country better for someone? Now, I'm not saying people in the America First movement, especially people higher up, actually want to make anything better. Like, don't fall for that trap, because we have it in the UK with Reform. Reform often pay more lip service to making things better, but they won't actually make things better either. They're still bought and paid for. They're still in bed with the same elite as the other political parties. They're just using this to get into power. But like with the Tory party in the UK being basically eaten alive by Reform, what I think might happen in America is America First, especially after Donald Trump, might get rid of old guard people like Ben Shapiro, because they offer absolutely nothing to you apart from agreeing with you on the racism. But today I want to focus less on the kind of civil war over Israel, and I want to talk more about the economic stuff, because I've said this a lot. I fundamentally think that most people don't like capitalism. And one thing I've noticed in my 13 years following politics is there is a general shift by everyone to being anti-capitalism in some form. A lot of the way it manifests itself on the right is mainly focusing on massive corporations. Not saying the left don't have a problem with that themselves, but also we focus more on the global system of economics, regardless of it taking a form in a corporation or just something a bit more local, I guess. But you've seen the reaction to Trump talking about 50-year mortgages, Trump even suggesting maybe 15-year car loans, and basically you will own nothing. And I think fundamentally everyone can feel this. Everyone can feel their lives, standards of living is getting worse, paying more, paying loads of subscriptions, and not actually owning anything and being a slave. Now, leftists always think that, yes, we are slaves to capitalism, you're a wage slave, you're a slave to the system, but conservatives often don't think this. But when you're talking about 50-year mortgages, it's not just leftists who can understand. That will make you a slave to a bank. So all of that coming up for you today. If you like the video after you've watched it, please like, maybe subscribe to the channel. If you want to follow me on social media at the Kavernacle on Blue Sky and also on Instagram. And if you want to support my work, check me out on Patreon and also YouTube memberships. So like I said, Ben Shapiro's YouTube channel is doing very poorly. If you look at the last year or so, or 2 years nearly, of views, massively, massively down. And if you look at his monthly subscribers over the last year, pretty much trending downwards as well. So it's pretty clear he's becoming increasingly irrelevant despite being so famous for so long. And if you look at his YouTube channel, the views aren't always great. And if you look at the comments now, this is just the comments on all of them. It's just loads of America First conservatives posting and spamming about just everything to do with the Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson civil war. And this is basically on every single one of his videos. Now, when groups decide to do a coordinated brigade and stuff, you can get loads of spam like this. But the extent of it is pretty crazy, and I don't think people should downplay the extent of it. This is literally every video and every comment at the moment is literally about this Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes drama, and he also called out Candace Owens recently as well, who responded. So she responded, and more people are obviously getting in the dog pile against him. And increasingly, as the right wing in America becomes more anti-Israel, it feels like people like Ben Shapiro can't really survive in that political climate. But also, there is something on the right now where people are becoming, I wouldn't call them hardcore anti-capitalists, but they're realizing that, yeah, maybe the system isn't working. So I saw this screenshot going around, and I don't know if this is actually real, but I did see someone reporting it. So the White House talking about 15-year car loans. Everyone hated that. Like, all the Trump supporters hated it. Trump saying there's no affordability crisis. Someone who works for Tim Pool saying whoever's advising Trump on this needs to be fired. Trump talking about the 50-year mortgage, saying it's not a big deal. You go from 40 to 50, and him being corrected, saying it's actually going from 30 to 50. Marjorie Taylor Greene has been talking more about like people not being able to afford things, and someone asked Donald Trump about this, and he's clearly not liking it. So it's pretty clear that a lot of Americans are really feeling like how bad the economy is, especially with the government shutdown. So I think things are just getting so bad for so many people. You seeing your leaders like defending the status quo more and more and more is just insane, especially when you have someone like Zoran Mamdani coming in and he's suggesting things that are pretty common sense that everyone can agree would make their lives better unless you're like some landlord or an elite business owner. So I think there generally is a more economic resentment in America right now. And although they hate Ben Shapiro for defending Israel, now they're also attacking him for defending the status quo. So Nick Fuentes retweeted this like video of him on a podcast with Konstantin Kizin, a guy who dogpiled me on Twitter years ago for saying that if you think the USSR was worse than the Nazis, you're actually a fascist or something like that. Him and Jordan Peterson both were attacking me for that take. But anyway, he posted part of the podcast where Ben Shapiro talks about people feeling entitled to like own a home, have a living and shit like this. And this probably gets to the heart of why people actually hate him and how the hate can be sustained, because they might hate him initially because he's a Jew and because of the Israel stuff. But to actually abandon him fully and really leave him behind, it's stuff like this. So let's watch a clip of this and let's listen to him discuss, you know, the economy essentially with these two.
Affordability is not like Beetlejuice, where if you just say it over and over, it suddenly arrives. You actually have to pursue policies that are likely to alleviate an affordability problem. But if your solution is always give me more power, and it does seem like that is the solution of the day from both sides, actually, then you're likely to just continue penduluming one side to the other. Because people don't want to learn the actual lesson, which is if you actually want affordability, then either you have to change policies or change locations. Those are really the only two things. And also, I think more broadly, it's not about affordability. We have trained an entire generation of people to believe that if their lives are not what they want them to be, it's the fault of systems, as opposed to decisions that are in their own control. And politicians absolutely have a stake in selling that. A lot of people in our industry have a stake in selling that. It makes people feel good about themselves and bad about the world. And the reality is, if you want a better life, you should feel better about the world and worse about yourself until you actually, go do the right things.
I broadly, generally speaking, as a matter of principle, agree with you. But I mean, I was looking around at property prices, real estate prices in New York. I'm doing pretty well for myself. I feel kind of poor looking at those things.
Oh, no, it's unaffordable. And I'm not saying it's not affordable.
Right.
It absolutely is unaffordable. And if you wanted to make a political difference, what you would do is you would relieve the building regulations. You would make it easier for people to build, not harder. You wouldn't rent control, because if you stop rent controlling, then that creates incentive for people to build. You would allow people to build up further. You would get rid of many of the code regulations that are kind of antiquated. Like there are things you actually could do. And then if you're a young person and you can't afford to live here, then maybe you should not live here. I mean, that is a real thing. Yeah, I know that we've now grown up in a society that says that you deserve to live where you grew up. But the reality is that the history of America is almost literally the opposite of that. The history of America is you go to a place where there is opportunity. And if the opportunities are limited here and they're not changing, then you really should try to think about other places where you have better opportunities. Again, that's not saying that public policy can't change. I think it can, but I think that the solutions being offered are untenable.
So that is hardly a winning message for conservatives. Yeah, Gen Z, your life sucks, Have you thought about moving somewhere else? Because also, I think if your life sucks and you can't afford what you're growing up in, there's only so many places you can move and actually afford it. Because I read somewhere that it's basically pretty much unaffordable to live in like a 1-bedroom apartment on your own in America. Like loads of Americans could not afford to do that. So what happens if you're single and you wanna do what's right in the capitalist dream? You wanna get a job. You wanna go to college. You wanna get a job. You wanna make something of yourself in the capitalist economy. Well, Ben Shapiro is saying if it's too unaffordable, it's your fault. Like, go somewhere else. And this brand of individualism is straight out of like the 2010s. It doesn't work anymore because when corporations own everything and they're jacking up the price of everything and everything is so unaffordable, like even the host there saying, when I look at New York like house prices, I feel poor. It's just something that is becoming an absolute global issue. You can't run away from this, especially in a country like America. Like, there's no way you're going to go in America that this won't be an issue. So it's completely out of touch. And he's talking about his ideas for policies. Like, think about what he just said about like building regulations. Does anyone even understand what he's talking about? Like, yeah, I'm sure there are some building regulations that stop people from building houses. We do need to build more houses, but that's not going to solve the problem. Building more houses is not going to solve the problem. There are plenty of places in England, especially London, where there are loads of empty fucking flats owned by billionaires and rich corporations that are not filled. What you need is the government to come in, and like I was saying in my Gary's economics videos, if you have buildings like that you just don't fill and you just don't make available to the public at reasonable prices, you have to find these corporations, and you also have to take some of these buildings and make them into public housing again. These people, like conservatives, don't want to actually attack the problems, which are landlords, which even the father of modern capitalism, Adam Smith, fucking despised landlords. So there's nothing in the spirit of capitalism. And originally, that was pro-landlord. But these people like Ben Shapiro, because they protect the capitalist class, they're not going to say that's part of the problem. And even he's talking about you need to not do rent control. Although I've seen some arguments on the left for getting rid of rent control, I don't think a lot of people, especially in the context of New York, talking about Mamdani, would say they wish their apartment wasn't rent controlled. Like, people literally don't leave their apartments for decades because they actually have rent control, which means they can actually afford to stay living where they grew up and stuff, right? So again, this is what is being offered to young people. So you have everyone in America, all the young people who might have watched Ben Shapiro growing up, they see what Israel have done to Palestine. You can't ignore it, and it's really, really hard unless you're completely brainwashed and indoctrinated in like either Christian Zionism, just general Zionism. You're not going to see what's happening and think Israel are the good guys and America should give money to what's happening over there, right? And then you hear him make the economic argument like this. It's no wonder that people are going to turn to people like Marjorie Taylor Greene or Nick Fuentes, who say something that, even though it's wrong, they're literally saying what your problems are. So they're saying your problems are rent, grocery, fuel prices. But what they often focus on is they're like, get rid of illegal immigrants because that's the problem, right? Where Ben Shapiro agrees illegal immigrants are actually an issue, but he doesn't even diagnose the real problem. Like, he doesn't even want to admit it's a problem. If you can't afford where you live, it's actually a you problem and you're a failure. Again, privilege, out of touch. This guy is worth so much money, so you can see why people absolutely are sick of his shit. This was going viral again, but this is from a couple of years ago. Ben Shapiro says no one should be retiring at 65 years old. I think retirement is stupid unless you have some sort of health problem.
And let's be real about this. It's insane that we haven't raised the retirement age in the United States. It's totally crazy. Joe Biden, if that were the case, Joe Biden should not be running for president. Hey, Joe Biden is 81 years old. The retirement age in the United States at which you start to receive Social Security and you are eligible for Medicare is 65. Joe Biden has technically been eligible for Social Security and Medicare for 16 years, and he wants to continue in office until he is 86, which is 19 years past when he would be eligible for retirement. No one in the United States should be retiring at 65 years old. Frankly, I think retirement itself is a stupid idea unless you have some sort of health problem. Everybody that I know who is elderly, who has retired, is dead within 5 years. And if you talk to people who are elderly and they lose their purpose in life by losing their job and they stop working, things go to hell in a handbasket real quick. But put all of that aside, just on a fiscal level and on a logical level. When Franklin Delano Roosevelt established 65 as the retirement age, the average life expectancy in the United States was 63 years old. Today, the average life expectancy in the United States is close to 80. It's totally insane that you believe that you should be able to work from the time that you are essentially 20 to the time that you are 65, which is a 45-year period, pay in, and then you will receive Social Security benefits sufficient to support you and your family, you and your wife or whatever, for like another 20 years. That's crazy talk. That is not fiscally sustainable. The notion that if you have to raise the retirement age to 67 or 68, that everyone is going to fall apart. My parents are that age. My parents are not retired. And they shouldn't retire. It would be very bad for them to retire.
So again, imagine you're a conservative who's struggling, like you're a manual labourer maybe, who's 50 years old. Like I have a lot of people in my family who are manual labourers, and it's like telling them, yeah, we should raise the retirement age. You actually don't deserve to ever stop working. Just shows how out of touch and privileged he is. Yeah, your parents are still working because they probably do something like that requires them to sit at a desk all day, or they're probably so wealthy now and self-employed they can do whatever the fuck they want. They're not people working at McDonald's. They're not people who are carpenters or plumbers and people who are doing really physically hard jobs. Of course, it's an absolutely stupid argument. So combine that with 50-year mortgages, 15-year car loans, and what they're saying is you will work forever, you will be a slave to a bank, and we will milk you for every last cent while giving nothing back. And that's Donald Trump and Ben Shapiro trying to promise, like, Gen Z people, that's the life you deserve. Be an absolute slave. And again, leftists, we always say you are a slave to capitalism, you're a wage slave, mortgage slave, all that stuff. But now conservatives, they're not even pretending that isn't what they believe. People like Ben Shapiro and Trump, they want you to be a slave forever. So in that climate, how can people like even defend Ben Shapiro on like the merit of his argument? Like if he was saying actual solutions to problems, but just saying, yeah, like it's not totally the immigrants' fault, we need to do X, Y, and Z and everything like that, you could maybe understand why people might cling to him, but he's getting to be an older millennial. Now you're getting a Gen Z in the conservative movement in America who are just as racist as Ben Shapiro, but they've added more people onto it, so they really, really hate Indians and they really hate Jews. And they're also talking about economic problems that affect everyone to resonate, to have their message resonate more. And then, of course, the 20,000 subs he's losing are just the beginning, because the status quo conservatives in the West, they're getting outflanked by the far right because they just keep saying to people, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. We're going to keep doing austerity. We're going to keep, cutting taxes for the rich. We're going to keep jumping in bed with these giant corporations that make your life worse. And we're going to raise the retirement age and we're going to tax you more. And I'm going to defend that. If you don't like it, move. So there is literally no incentive for people to support this anymore. And even brainwashed conservatives in America are waking up to this. But that is a little follow-up to my video I made last week. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.